This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
Back again to sponsor our podcast is Muslim Kids TV with the 25% discount using code MK2021. Have your kids play both secular and Islamic games and catch Islamic videos you won't find anywhere else. These games are coded primarily by Muslim moms, so you're never going to hate your kids having electronics again. Another one of our sponsors this month is Guidance Residential, bringing you an upcoming webinar titled Explore a Growing Niche Market Opportunity for Real Estate Agents. All of our Muslim mommy realtors, this one's for you, coming June 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern, RSVP at the link shown. Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to another episode of Momming While Muslim. This is Uzma Jaffrey.
And this is Zeba Hassan. For some reason, I swallowed my smoothie and now I feel it stuck in my throat. We can eat and drink again, which is always still so weird. But Uzma, my dearest, how was your week this week while I get my throat back up and ready to go?
Yeah, this is why I tell you not to drink those healthy smoothies, because there's always too much fiber getting stuck in the back of your throat.
It's the kale. It's the kale.
Get stuck at the top, and then I promise you it'll get stuck at the bottom too. So
no,
good luck with that.
I don't need that image. Oh my God.
So this week was fun because if you guys have been following along, then you know that I renovated a house from top to bottom and moved in last year. And for some reason, I still feel like with a renovation, it should have been turnkey when I moved in. But as it turns out, guys, when you move into a brand new place, there's always work that needs to be done. And this week, my master bedroom is finally being done. Like my happy, safe space, my quiet space is being built. My sanctuary is being finished. And it's been a long time coming, and I'm very, very excited about it. And I might start podcasting from my bed.
Oh my gosh, I would love that.
Right?
Because then it would be like I'm getting that peaceful vibes because your room is looking beautiful, mashallah.
Inshallah, yeah.
I'm loving it. You know, I am wrapping up one of my courses, so that's always so fun because I'm getting, you could start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Not that it's, lessening my load at all, but I do feel like it's a little bit harder going back to school in your, later years, I have to say, just because it's not that you don't have the energy, but it is that. And plus you just have a lot more responsibilities, right? Like, so as I'm trying to write a paper, I have somebody coming up to me and doing this. I have somebody saying, could you quiz me on here? You just have your hands in so many different pots that it's hard to prioritize. And then you feel guilty for letting some of the balls drop, and that constant feeling of, am I forgetting something? Am I not? But I'm enjoying the process so much that I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. So I am fatigued, I am tired, but I didn't get this chance, because I did become a mom a little bit earlier. And I'm enjoying it. So I'm just going to keep sticking to it. And I have to say, it is such a good example. I'm admitting this to myself, for my daughter, for my sons, to show I didn't get it. There are multiple chances in life. Yeah. That's the truth of it. And, I didn't have that opportunity the first time around. I'm taking the opportunity the second time around. And I'm getting it done. And I think, as an older student, I have to say I'm enjoying the process so much more because I'm learning for the sake of learning versus learning for a job or an outcome or a career or whatever the case may be. So I'm really enjoying the process. So inshallah, I am citing my sources and getting the good grades, and I'm definitely proud of myself for that. But I am interested to hear what our soapbox for the week is, Uzma, because I'm always curious to see what you have to say about all of that.
100%. I do want to say how proud I am of you for taking on so
Oh,
much and going back to
thank
school
you.
because, like you said, I mean, we talk about modeling the behavior. We model the people that we want our kids to be, and I think you're doing that in
Hmm.
the most beautiful way. And I'm very proud of
Thank
you.
you.
And I'm so happy that you're citing your sources and your papers so you don't get a big grade 0. Thank you for
Yes.
doing that.
So the big fat F that I got on my first paper, gonna admit it, gonna admit it. I forgot to cite my references. Sorry,
She won't do
I'm
that
never
again.
doing that again.
Yes. And what we like to offer at Momming While Muslim always is citing our references in our show notes. So
Mhm.
please do make sure you check those out. They are available online, definitely on Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone. The Android, I believe, I'll have to check on the Android how you find the show notes. To be really honest, I'm not exactly sure where they show up, but we will let you know shortly. I wanted to talk today about the ceasefire in Gaza. So Israel finally decided, as gracious and wonderful as they are, to provide a ceasefire and stop pummeling the tiny territory of Gaza with their targeted missiles. That ceasefire lasted a whole 12 hours before soldiers, police, militarized police, of course, started showing up at the Aqsa compound and firing tear gas and rubber bullets at worshippers on the high holy day for Muslims, which is Friday afternoons for the prayer. There is no information currently on what precipitated the fire. The only thing that we can think of is the same thing that started before the initial attacks on the Aqsa compound on the 10th of May. And that was that people were gathering during Ramadan to pray. And the only other thing that Palestinians were doing now at the Aqsa compound was gathering for their Friday prayer, which they have done since time immemorial or for the last 1500 years of Islam. We're not sure what this is going to mean, but I have money on but Hamas, which I think are the two key words, and the one argument that we hear repeatedly is but Hamas. So Hamas started firing rockets on Israel in retaliation for the occupation of the Aqsa compound, which is not allowed under international law. And they fired the rockets, and then Israel, we know what they did. And I believe that as a result of the breaking of the ceasefire by what appears to be Israel, Hamas will fire again. And when that happens, Israel will continue its pummeling of the Gaza Strip and continue destroying people that they destroyed in 2014 and 2018, and then even a little bit last year. So stay tuned for more on that. Also, today earlier today, you will have seen our power panel when there are no safe spaces by Palestinian mom sisters who are very much voiced and will be taking our platform in order to talk about their experiences, not to educate, but in order to share those narratives, because we are seeing a drastic shift in the narrative about Palestine and Israel that maybe people were not ready to digest. But the power of social media is such that you don't have any option but to see the truth. For many, many years, it could be hidden. For many, many years, it could be propaganda. That is not working anymore. We say it all the time. Fake news existed all of our lives as Muslims in America. Zeba and I can attest to that as children who were born and raised here, as women who were born and raised here. And now we are seeing kind of part of that fake news machine breaking down, hopefully to the advantage of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. So we do hope you stay tuned for that. We do hope that you get involved in boycott, divestment, and sanction actions. And if you want to find out more about what the BDS movement is, go back and listen to our episode from July 25th, 2019, when we talk about how anti-boycott, divestment, sanctions, that particular movement that prevents the economic and academic boycotting of Israel and Israeli products, how that affects our American civil rights. This is something that has been going on for a very long time, and we hope that while you're getting yourself well versed in Palestine, in Gaza, in the Israeli war machine. We hope that you take a listen to that and not bandwagon your support for Philistine, but make sure that you are here for the long haul, as we believe that we all need to be. That's our soapbox for today.
Thank you for that. It's you know, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but before we get into today's episode, I'd like to say we are a very much an interfaith podcast. We believe in dialogue. We believe in the exchange of ideas and trying to find the commonality. But, as I'm reading more, part of what you learn, what I'm learning through my mediation classes right now is that both sides have to agree that there are some commonalities that need to be agreed on. And I fear that in this particular circumstance, we're so far apart from each other that might be a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to continue to hold on to hope for that, because obviously nobody wants to see children of any side getting killed. I mean, that's just not something we believe in here either. So, like Uzma mentioned, the BDS movement, power of the pocket is always something that we can do and we can control, regardless of, your political stance is something that we, on a humanitarian effort need to understand. Nobody wants this type of killing to continue. So I don't know. I just kind of had to. I'm not part of your soapbox, but it's just something that I wrestle with, as doing all the interfaith work that we do. How do we get to that middle ground that we need to get to in order to have the safe and appropriate dialogue? But perhaps we save that for another podcast, as I like to say.
Or for our panel.
Or for our panel, we'll talk about it. We're going to give that. We'll push that to another time zone. We're going to get the time zones correct this time. This month's Mommies in the Masjid continues as we discuss all male panels, and we've seen them. We've seen them plenty of times, and they're usually all male uncles. The uncles that are like shushing us from the sidelines, shushing us as adults from the sidelines. Let's just be honest about that. But they're both in the audience and the expert spaces and at conference and seminars. These underrepresented panels are hurting our institutions and driving financially independent and Islamically educated women like ourselves away from the masajids and Islamic organizations. We are putting our children in Sunday schools from our homes, people, since many of us had to learn how to live without the masajids and masjids during the key parts of our worship. Are we going to go back to it if we continue to be underrepresented there? I'm not quite sure about that, but we do know we have been following one person that we might, if she's anywhere near us, is Hind Maliki. And that's I know that's how she pronounces it. So I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. Let's put on our seatbelts for her streamlined, and this is super streamlined bio, because she has a bio as long as my wingspan, which is pretty long with basketball standards. Thank you very much. And she is a second generation Sudanese American, graduate of Brown University with a degree in international relations. She is an educator for the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, which is also ISPU. Hind helped spark the national conversation focusing on women in the mosque in 2012, way before we started talking about it, let's just be honest, which is kind of like what we're talking about this month. And she did it almost 10 years ago.
Oh my God.
That's a long, the fact that we can say multiple decades, that's a blessing. Let's just be honest. Her activism has spurred the Islamic Society of North America's Mosque Inclusion Task Force formation. Subsequent white paper, ISNA released. It's a white paper, ISNA? Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
ISNA released a white paper statement.
Oh, including women in the masjid. She also serves as an advisor to the ISPU's Reimagining Muslim Spaces project. Her interfaith work is extensive. She is also the former core leader at the Muslim Anti-Race Collaborative, another organization we love and we obviously support here at Mommy While Muslim. We are so giddy about her role as the founder of the Side Entrance. And we're going to talk about that as an award-winning website documenting Muslim women's prayer experiences. And let me be honest, we have all had them. Was also featured as CNN's 25 influential American Muslims in 2018. And of course, she's adding being a podcast guest here at Mommy While Muslim.
Inshallah,
So
that
we
makes it
are,
on her bio.
I mean, hello, she's going to put that in her bio because I know we're putting her on our bio, and we are so excited to have her here today. Hind, thank you so much for joining us on Mommy While Muslim.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Zeba and Uzma for the invitation. I love your podcast.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
that you all have a podcast. I think these are stories that are underrepresented, that for too long unheard. And so I definitely believe not in speaking on behalf of others, but on literally passing the mic to people who
Mm-hmm.
have underrepresented stories. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and to discuss with you all this really important topic.
Yeah, awesome. So we usually kick off by asking our guests to tell us their mom story, or if they don't have any kids, tell us about your mom and her influence on your work today.
Sure. Okay. So I don't have any kids, but that doesn't stop me, of course, from advocating on behalf of all moms and their kids in mosques and in religious spaces, which we can talk about. And I'll tell you a little bit about my mom. My mom is actually not just my mom, but she was also my teacher, like literally my teacher in high school. My mother
Oh,
is an Islamic school teacher. She's the head of the Arabic and Religion department at Aqsa High School outside of Chicago. This high school was the very first all girls Islamic high school that was established in the United States. So I actually have to tell you a little bit about this school. So I attended there from eighth grade through my senior year. So I graduated from there. It's all girls. All of the teachers are women. Not all are
love that.
Muslim, right?
Okay.
So, what does that mean? That means your religion teachers are Muslim, your Arabic teachers are Muslim, your Quran teachers, or sorry, they're all women. You know, you're learning your faith from women. You're learning history and English and mathematics from women. If you're a girl and you're a jock, if you're a girl and you're into politics, you're a girl, you're into, photography, that space was completely cultivated and encouraged by your female teachers and by the sisterhood that has developed in that school. Of course, it's not all perfect. Teenage girls are also not perfect. And so there were,
That's putting it lightly. Let's just
right?
be real.
Exactly. So that was my mom. My mom was my Arabic and religion Quran teacher,
Oh.
and so I grew up with, alhamdulillah, with the privilege of having a mom who not only had access to religious sciences, but was also a teacher of religious sciences,
Mm.
not only in the school, but also she would give lectures, and she still does, to women and girls in Arabic and English in the community. The other thing I wanted to mention about my school is that when I was a student there in the 90s, so I'm dating myself, uh, we did not have a building. So where were we
Mm.
housed? We were housed in the mosque. So that meant
Wow.
5 days a week from 7:45 to almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're at the mosque. The mosque was literally overrun with teenage girls, some of whom wore headscarves, others didn't. People from mostly Arab backgrounds, but other backgrounds as well. And we prayed Dhuhr and oftentimes Maghrib, Asr and Maghrib as well in the mosque. We prayed Friday prayers in the mosque. We prayed if there was a janaza, if there was a solar eclipse, right? We were
Mhm.
in the mosque, and oftentimes we were the only people who were praying along with the imam, the muezzin, and like a couple of other men. And at that time, we were actually in the musalla, in the main prayer sanctuary, which today is exclusively for men. And actually, as I was growing up, in this mosque community, when I was a child, even younger than teenage years, women prayed in the sanctuary, in the musalla, without a barrier behind the men, i.e., the prophetic sunnah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
and as the community expanded and grew, women were then shifted for the major prayers, for Jum'ah, for Taraweeh, to the school rooms that I was in, right, with the removable walls, with like Amelia Earhart on the walls, and
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare
Periodic
on the
table.
walls.
Mhm.
Exactly. And then those were still upstairs. And then I think I was about 15 or 16 years old when we were shifted down to the basement with, you know, and that was our rec hall. That was our rec center as a school. Like our lockers were, in the side. That was a place where we had lunch. That's how I kind of viewed that space. Today, especially after the school moved into its own building, which I always tell girls today, I'm like, you kids, you don't know how great you have it.
Yeah.
Back in
You
my
have
day.
back in my day, you have a swimming pool. I mean, like,
Wow.
I know. I mean, I don't think I would trade that necessarily for the ability to pray 5 days a week in the musalla,
Mhm.
but still, the swimming pool is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and so once the school moved out and they have their own building, the mosque completely remodeled the space. And today, I mean, 20 plus years later, women are still in the basement. And I'll actually share
Mm-hmm.
with you all some photos of this. It's not like some dank, dingy basement. It's very beautiful. It's pretty well lit. It's very clean, but it's still,
A
a
basement.
basement. So,
Suboptimal.
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean that's a slightly little bit of my mom's influence on me. Again, like I mentioned, I have always been I've been lucky, and I feel that privilege that I completely trust. If I have a question about the Quran, if I have a question about this hadith that sounds off, like what's that all about, or Quran 434, like she was the first person that I learned from what you might term, or some people might term, an alternative interpretation, that it's not about physical abuse, but
Mm-hmm.
also this idea that the word daraba means to essentially hit the road as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so this, later, for me anyway, Dr. Amina Wadud and other people, kind of had a linguistic interpretation of that ayah. Um, but but I learned that from my mom, and my mom is not, some kind of progressive, left wing socialist, on the far left, kind of
A bra
end of the
burning
spectrum.
feminist.
No, 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 no. She's pretty socially conservative. She's religiously orthodox. She's a hafiza. She's a teacher. Like she's
Mashallah.
not, you know. So again, like I feel really lucky that I had that kind of a foundation, and that's essentially my mom's story. And I try to, when I think of women in the mosque, I think of, you know. The idea of who we're serving, people like me, people like the girls I went to high school with, our families, our moms. When I think of especially like who is the community not benefiting from, the wide community, it's people like my mom and her circle of friends who are
Mm-hmm.
highly educated, who are trained in the Islamic sciences, some of whom choose to only teach women, others, that's just essentially the space that they were placed in, right? And so then there's some structural barriers for many women to be able to pursue Islamic knowledge in the traditional way, to come and say, I have this ijaza, I have that ijaza from this university or that, place. And then today you get people to say, well, okay, well that lady, she might be educated or she might be a pious woman, but she doesn't have the exact same credentials that a male might have. Even if, she's been a teacher, respected, um, and completely validated by the imams of her mosque for 40 years. And this is
Mhm.
not just about my mom, I promise,
Yeah.
but it's about the moms in my community, many of whom are like my mom, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a huge asset that we don't get to tap into. Besides not serving those assets, not letting
Mm-hmm.
them be of service, I think is a huge detriment to our masjid families and our communities. So, you know, um, I hear it from the way you talk about your mom. I can read it in your resume. And I think I kind of understand where your interest in activism came from. but tell us about it anyway, and tell us about the scope of your activism work and like, where it started and where it is now.
Sure. The other side of the story, of course, for me is also my father, my late father, Allah yarhamu. He and my mom, their marriage was a marriage, an equal partnership kind of a
Mm-hmm.
marriage. And, I don't have any brothers, but my sister and I never felt that if we had brothers, that there would be any kind of gender discrimination in our family because of the way that our parents interacted with each other and how they interacted with us. And so my dad was also very interested in, human rights, and he worked in this field of like of human rights, raising awareness and kind of activism in that sense. I was just thinking earlier today that probably I'm pretty sure, like I'm 95% certain that the first protest I ever went to was for Palestine when I was a child. And certainly, when I was in
Mm-hmm.
my adolescence, for again for Palestine, many times for Palestine,
You've had to
and
stand up
for
a lot. Yeah.
yeah, for Kashmir, for Bosnia,
Yeah, I was going to
and
say let's add Kashmir, Bosnia, all
exactly
of that to the
Chechnya. I mean,
mix.
so like all of those conflicts, they really kind of affected me, and particularly I want to say the Bosnian genocide, because
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe I was like in seventh and eighth grade when that started, and I was learning about the Holocaust at the same time
Mm-hmm.
for the first. And again, mind you, at an Islamic school that was primarily Palestinian, I'm learning about the Holocaust, and I'm seeing images of emaciated men behind barbed wire in black and white. And I go home later that evening, turn on CNN or ABC, and you see color footage of emaciated men behind barbed wire in Europe, targeted, another religious faith targeted because of their identity. And that just, I thought, what does it mean to say never again when it's
Mhm.
happening, you know,
Again.
Over
in
and
our eyes?
over. Yeah.
Over and over again. And so I really was interested, and of course, the genocide in Rwanda, and my family's from Sudan, and so there was a long-standing civil war that was occurring, based, on ethnic, religious, racial cleavages, and so I was just really motivated by the idea that all residents of a land, whether they're citizens or not, um, should have equal access to education, equal right to life, should have equal rights, right? And part
Yes.
of that is because I grew up as a minority. Part of that is because my kind of political awareness was during a time when minorities were being persecuted
Mm-hmm.
because they were minorities wherever they were. And so, I ended up studying international relations in college because of that. And I thought that I wanted to, and I did. I had the goal of continuing in the policy field, whether it was in U.S. government, whether it was with the UN, whether it was in think tanks, kind of that's what I was thinking about at the time. But then 9/11 happened,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up pivoting. I pivoted because I saw that my community, which in a lot of ways is a really warm and wonderful community, that's unfortunately you might describe at that time as insular or in a bubble.
Yes.
And I didn't even realize, I saw when I would see not just the leaders of my particular local community, but just across the country, that a lot of immigrant Muslim leaders, they just were not able to translate culturally
Yes.
our
Yeah.
values to the people who are watching them, or people who are in the audience, like at interfaith events. And I'd love to talk to you more about what you said about the interfaith conversation earlier at the top. But people who are there already, like you're preaching to the choir, they want to learn more about Islam. They're open to wanting to learning and to being in solidarity with their neighbors. But then they're just hearing some dry, kind of esoteric conversation about the five pillars, and it's just
Yes.
like,
Nobody
what
wants
are
to
we
hear that
doing?
right now. Nobody wants to
We
And
hear
can
that.
we can Google
yeah,
that. Now we can Google that. Yeah.
exactly. You can
Here's a
Google that.
pamphlet. If you want to know, this is what I would say. If you want to know more about X and Y and Z, there's some pamphlets at the door, but this is what we're here to talk about
There's
today.
7 different
Exactly.
pamphlets printed very poorly in bad English
Exactly. And
about
that really awful paper that gives you the willies when you touch them. Oh, it gives me the
Yeah.
goosebumps.
And
Yes.
and the dye comes off in your hands. But like,
They
the
did the
prophets
best they
like
can, guys.
they
We
did. They
have to
did.
remember that.
And
Okay.
Allah will reward them for that,
Yes,
Allah
honestly.
will
inshallah.
reward them. They did the best they can. But we
Yeah.
can still make fun of them because they're ours. So we can make fun of them.
But no
They're our
one else can
dads.
make fun of them.
Nobody else can make fun of them, but we
Yeah,
can
just
because
us,
they're
Exactly.
our
exactly.
dads.
Yeah.
So you know how the Prophet ﷺ was described as a walking Quran, right?
Mhm.
So like people can Google the Quran. They'll probably get very bad like English translations of it. But people can read the Quran. But most people won't. Like you're going to be the Quran. You're going to be the message of Islam that people are going to see. And
Mhm.
so you're going to be a literal walking Quran. And
Mhm.
so that was my shift in thinking, and it was very quick. Like I could actually even feel it. Like I was praying tahajjud like the night of 9/11 because I was just so scared about
Mhm.
everything and thinking, okay, like I need to change what I'm like everything that I had studied, everything that I had prepped for, everything was like I could feel the momentous nature of that moment.
Mhm.
And so, I thought, okay, like pivot, switch, like Kashmir and Palestine and all of these humanitarian disasters and oppressions of people abroad is always going to happen until U.S. policy changes. And U.S. policy is not going to change until Muslims in the U.S. start to, or here again, I want to say immigrant Muslims, um, start to, see themselves not as visitors and guests in this country,
Mhm.
and then start to be
Yes.
a value added in terms of the actual values of this country. Um,
Yes.
and and then so that's essentially that was the switch.
I
No,
love
I
that. That is
definitely
so our love
appreciate that.
language.
Yeah, and that is our love, that is our love language because you're only going to be able to make change when you embrace it, right? And truth be told, and I've said this before, like I feel like I can do. I can't. I'm not going to speak for Uzma where this is concerned. I can be the Muslim that I can be, and I want to be here in America. I don't know if I could do this anywhere else, or even be able to speak on a platform that we're speaking on right
Mhm.
now in any other country. So that's the one thing that we have to be mindful of. And I love what you just said, Hind, and it's and bringing back. Bringing back to what we're talking about today, because I love everything you're talking about. We'll have to bring you back on just to talk about all of this, because, part of why we started this was, pre 9/11, post 9/11, all of us are probably in the same age groups, similar. And I would guess that we were probably at the same rallies at the same time because I'm also from Chicago,
Oh, okay.
and I believe that you're so we're Song Foundation South, and
Ah,
you're
okay, yeah.
probably you were Bridgeview, so
Yes.
we didn't quite mesh other than at the rallies when we'd kind of like
Yeah.
see each other from the start and like kind
I
of
think she's
whisper
younger
at
than
each
us though, because
other.
Bosnia happened when I was in college. So
Bosnia
Oh.
did
I'm
not
dating
happen when you
myself.
were in college.
Are you sure? I
I'm
remember like doing the
positive.
refugee work for,
You need to
when they
go
started
back and
coming as refugees, I was in college.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
That's
that's
She's
what happened.
smoking
that's
crack right now.
I know, I
Like,
was gonna
there's
I
say, I'm
know.
like,
no
really?
way.
Because
I'm
your
trying to
skin
get
is
really
awesome,
old
if
really
that's the
fast.
case.
Yeah.
I know she's not that old, everybody. Because I remember, I still remember. Did you go? We're totally going off topic, but the Chicago chartered a plane to New York for the New York
Oh.
rally.
I didn't go to New York. All the stuff I did was in Chicago, and I
Oh,
remember,
and it was
yeah.
so fun. And it was the first time my dad, I mean, and this is what I'm saying, like we got this from our father. So we make fun
Yeah.
of them, and we do, and they hear us, and Father's Day is
We
coming
mimic
up and
their
we love them.
accents.
We mimic their accents. But guess what? They
Not
were
allowed.
doing things. They gave us like my dad was taking us to these rallies and
Mm.
giving us this feeling of like speaking on behalf of the voiceless. Like all of that
Yeah.
was entrusted in us by our parents and our parents' generation. Like I remember chartering a plane because there was a huge rally for Bosnia in New York, and it was an entire plane, and we were singing Tala al Badru Elena like
Oh,
on our
wow.
the when we were landing in like
Aw.
I still get goosebumps thinking about it, and that's my saying, like this activism, this sense of like speaking out for other people came from our fathers, and
Mm-hmm.
so we're gonna bring this back to the manels because I think that that's
Yeah.
a term you coined,
Manos.
and we do have to tell the uncles thank you so much for taking us to those things in those rallies and all of that. But you know what?
Now sit
You
down.
can retire now. Enjoy the fruits of your labor. You have sons and daughters that are fully capable of taking over,
And
and
grandchildren.
grandchildren at this
Yeah.
point, grandchildren.
Yep.
So can we please enjoy them? Just like hug them, like you can
Mm-hmm.
move on and let us do our thing. So first of all, let's talk about Manos.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? And two, why is it bad
Mm-hmm.
for our community to have all Manos?
Mm-hmm. So I did not come up with the term mantle. That was kind of in flotation. I think I got it from like the science Twitter community.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
They were like, no more
Twitter's
mantle.
contribution to English cannot be underplayed.
Exactly. I did, however, come up with the phrase, the hashtag Muslim male allies. More on that in a second. And
Ooh.
honestly, I was thinking about my dad and other Muslim male allies. But okay, so what is a manel? A manel is an all male panel on a panel that has no reason to be an all male panel. And it is, for example, there was a famous picture a few years ago that it became infamous, of a conference about women's rights in, I think, Saudi Arabia or somewhere in the Middle East. And the
I don't
conference
think it would be in
literally,
Saudi Arabia. Am I going to
I
get
don't
in
know,
trouble for
it
saying
was
that
it
out
was in
loud?
one of the Gulf
I
countries.
was like, are they gonna put a football against me? Because I doubt that a
No
women's
hunch for
rally.
you.
I don't know. I don't know, but
I
it
doubt
was
it.
definitely in a Gulf country, and
Okay,
it
okay.
said, it was like حقوق المرأة, like women's rights conference, and everybody in the room, and like ballroom, like maybe 1,000 people were there. Everyone was male, and
Yes.
so like this it became kind of infamous. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how are you going to be like, you can't talk about us without us, right? And so
Yes.
that's one aspect of an all male panel about a topic that does not need to be all male. Why? Because your
Yes.
audience is not all male. And here I
Yes.
want to maybe rebut, like, some pushbacks that folks give, like, okay, a man can be, an expert on, a million different things, and he's an expert on
Sure.
this topic, and that's what the topic of the panel is. Great, he's an expert on it. But that doesn't mean that he's always thinking about the experience of the female members of his audience. And
Yes.
this doesn't mean that there's bad intentions. So I want to give
No.
a little example of that. It's not quite a panel, but there's a talib of al-ilm, a student of knowledge. This last Ramadan, who posted a really helpful kind of thing on Facebook where he said, if you want to complete reading the Quran by the end of Ramadan, just read one juz a day, right? And then so I said, okay, thank you very much. If you're a woman and you are experiencing menstruation, don't read one juz a day because you're not going to finish the Quran, right? I said, think about doing it like 1.5 juz or 1.75 juz a day if you can. And then he said, "Oh, thank you." Like it was like a thing of like he wasn't thinking about that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the challenges. If you have an all male panel, even if they are experts in their field, even if they have all the best intentions, even if they know what the rules are for, and the fatwas are for women, right? Like most male scholars know about like menstruation and like, okay, that generally most Muslims agree that women don't pray or fast during menstruation, but you can do other things, right? So they know that, but they're not necessarily going to bring that when they have a spiritual or educational panel on women, or sorry, on Ramadan, because they're not, their normative audience is male, because their normative perspective is a male one. That's why I think
Yeah.
we need to have women on panels. And also, by the way, it's not just women. Like, I believe that we need to have completely mixed panels. We should have
Yes.
panels like if you're, especially if you're a national organization
Yes.
and you have access to national speakers, there's no reason why your panels, and especially these panels with like 8 people for some reason, because folks are on Zoom now and people are setting
Mhm.
aside 2 hours for events. There's no reason why you can't have a nice, healthy mix of Sunni and Shia, black and
Yes.
white, South
Yes.
Asian, Arab, Latino, East Asian, Muslim, young
Yes.
and old, right? Like people in
Yes.
college and our elders and everyone
Yes.
in between, and geographic diversity, because people,
Yes.
people, I got this when I was earlier in my career doing work around immigration rights, meeting with Muslims in the South, in like Tennessee and other places in the South,
Texas, where they say
Texas, they
y'all.
have a different, like, they have a different context of what immigration looks like for them, or the immigration,
Mhm.
the state laws around immigration, than, in the Midwest or in the North. And I wouldn't even have put to think that in my mind if I didn't meet this person and listen to them about kind of their engagement with evangelical Christians and all of that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, like, that's why all male panels should totally be canceled. By the way, canceling is not a bad thing. I don't even think
Mm-mm.
canceling is the word. I think it's held accountable. It's accountability,
Yes.
right? And let's do the best that we can to represent the people that we have, represent the amount of knowledge and the diversity of knowledge that we have, and
Mhm.
represent the experiences and actually teach to the experiences of our audience.
I think that
Yes.
that is so, so important and true as I'm charging my computer, which is threatening to die
Oh
on me.
no.
I know, right? No, it's good. Um, you know, the manels in terms of the lack of representation and needing to be canceled. You spoke to some of the reasons why that is, but I feel like, it's also a PR issue. So can you talk
Mhm.
optics
Oh
of
yeah.
manels to both modern Muslim audiences as well as, a growing
Yeah.
non-Muslim audience that is approaching us and saying, "Hey, we want to do these open houses. We want to attend and we want to see what you Muslims are really about."
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So one of the number one stereotypes, and you can argue whether it's a stereotype or not, that non-Muslim Americans have of Islam is that it is a sexist religion, that it is
Mhm.
against women. This is based off of data that ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, that I'm affiliated with, has done repeatedly over the years. Like Americans, like that has stayed. Like generally, even if Americans' views on Muslims in general, or Americans' views on are Muslims a terror threat to the United States,
Mhm.
that has kind of shifted throughout the years. But the belief that Islam as a religion is anti-woman, that hijab as a thing, or a headscarf as a thing itself, is debasing to women.
Mhm.
The views that women have literally half the rights of men in Islam, right? The mistaken belief of that. That is stable in terms of a thought that our fellow Americans have of Muslims. And so imagine a nice, Christian, Jewish, atheist, liberal
Wiccan. I don't
person,
care.
Wiccan,
Whatever you are.
whatever, wanting to come to the mosque open house and
Yes.
saying, "Oh, like I want to support you because uh, yeah, like the Muslim ban, it was terrible, whatever it is," and they go to the mosque and all of the speakers, all the Muslim speakers, are men, and the Muslim women are maybe nowhere to be seen, and then maybe the female speaker who's there is not Muslim, and she's the only woman who's in the mosque, the main musalla of the mosque. So we are, in this way, Manels are reinforcing the existing belief
Mhm.
of our fellow Americans that Islam is anti-woman, or
Yes.
that women are second-class citizens in Islam. And then for Muslims, and that's like the easiest thing to like to say no, because Islam is very clear, I think, that men and women are equal in the sight of Allah.
Exactly.
But anyway, and for Muslims, uh, that's also the case. A lot of Muslims believe Islam is a misogynist religion.
Yeah.
One, and then two, there now you have a movement of women and men hashtag Muslim allies, who will
Mm-hmm.
call out mosques and organizations who have manals. Like they literally will share the flyer on Facebook or WhatsApp groups, and then have a coordinated call to that mosque or emails, and then many times, like more than I can count on my hand, if the mosque doesn't respond or they respond in a condescending or the typical, oh, we tried to reach out to this mythical unicorn woman and the one that we have in our Rolodex, and she said that she's not available. But you know what, we were asking now like two other unicorn women. They also like these activists will also call local media. And a couple of years ago, like or maybe 3 years ago, like 2020 is essentially like a void in my
Yeah,
brain.
Yeah.
it's blank.
You're
Just
like,
went
what
back like
year is
that doesn't
it?
count.
When am
2
I?
years ago.
Can we get
You
can
know,
we get a can we get a do-over on 2020, please?
please.
No, I do not want to do over.
This is too much. Let's just like let's black it out and like it's kind
Yeah,
of like
keep
yeah.
going.
So you know, there was a mosque I want to say somewhere in the East Coast. I don't know if it was in Massachusetts or somewhere in New England, where they ended up calling local media, and local media made a conversation about it, like why are there no women allowed to enter your mosque for, I think it was Eid prayer or Ramadan prayer. And so Muslims themselves are not going to take it anymore, because it's really important to
Mm-hmm.
have that representation. Like if a mosque or an organization is self-describing as an authority, maybe not capital A
Mm-hmm.
authority, but an authority, an educational, religious authority, and they're asking us to give them money to
Yes.
perpetuate their authority. Well, I mean, are you really serving me? Like, mm-mm. I refuse. Like, I have now made a decision, and I've publicly said it. Like, I don't donate to mosques that don't have spaces for women. Period.
Yeah,
Like, it's just,
100%.
I mean, it's like the very base, it's like the small, like the lowest level of, um, you
Fulfilling
know,
the sunnah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like you can't even make the space. It's crazy. I'm just in love with that, and I know that there was I feel like it was also a couple of years ago when there was an all-male panel that was that you demonstrated to the rest of us. And I think it was the first time I ever looked at that flyer closely.
Mm.
So like literally within the last 5 years is when I finally was like, hey, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And why did it take so long for me to wake up? And I just think that, we've all been busy with other stuff, and now we have all of these privileges, including the resources and the time, and now that our kids are a little bit older, the energy to
Mm-hmm.
see these things that need to be done better.
Yeah.
That, maybe they did serve some very important roles back in the day when we were establishing these institutions, but now they're not serving our kids. They're certainly not serving us as mothers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and as mothers of daughters for sure. And we talked earlier about the ISNA statement on including women in the masjid. And so for
Mm-hmm.
those who don't know, we do have a large non-Muslim audience. ISNA is the Islamic Society of North America, which is the largest loosely governing body of Muslims in North America, so Canada, the United States, and, to some degree, Mexico. I've honestly not seen Mexico represented, and I apologize on behalf of ISNA. I'm not a representative of ISNA, by the way. So just putting it out there. So on their paper, they talk about the two hadiths that are often quoted to justify not including and not representing women in these religious spaces, whether it's a masjid or whether it's a religious organization. And one of them is the hadith that the best place for a woman to pray is her home. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I'm going to quote these is because this is exactly why when I was in college, I had to fight with my subcontinental father to go to the masjid, because he staunchly believed in this.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another story about Omar Omar radiallahu anh that he told me, and I will not share that right now because it's not in the ISNA paper. The second hadith is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, that had the Prophet ﷺ been alive today, he would not have allowed the women to go to the masjid. So Hind,
Mm-hmm.
ISNA does a great job of talking about the paper, but it is a white paper and it is very dry and very boring. If you would like to read it, it will be in our show notes. But Hind, if you could talk specifically to these two hadiths, because it's not just men that are perpetuating these hadiths as reasons to exclude women and not represent women. It's a lot of women
Mm-hmm.
that quote these two hadiths and say that, oh, this is why women should not be in these spaces.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, you're correct that it's a white paper. It was kind of a statement that they made in 2015 after working for a year with the Fiqh Council of North America. And so the Fiqh Council is a body that is affiliated with ISNA. And it is, again, North Canada and the United States. Again, I don't think that there's anyone representing Mexico in that body. And they essentially, they make religious statements, fatwas, which are legal, non-binding legal opinions for the believing community. And they have Sunni and Shia, and they have men and women. And they have a pretty, fairly impressive racial diversity considering.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that Fiqh Council, they spent a year along with members of the committee of which I was in to come up with this unanimous agreement to that statement. It was about 3 pages long in 2015. And in 2018, the Fiqh Council actually made it into an official fatwa. So there is now like essentially legal, non-binding legal backing for this statement. So,
Hashtag
okay.
not Sharia law.
Hashtag,
Those
yeah.
words here.
Hashtag not Sharia law. Hashtag just a recommendation based on
Strong
Islamic,
recommendation.
very strong recommendation to mosques and to Muslim communities. So, okay, so the two hadith is a saying or behavior practice of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the rules that he set through his behavior and then through his actual teaching that is separate from the Quran, which Muslims believe is the direct word of God as relayed to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel. Okay, so these are two separate, texts, if you want to call them that are both very sacred. The Quran has a higher degree of sacredness to Muslims than the Hadith do, for reasons because we believe that the Quran comes directly from God and the Hadith is the teachings of the Prophet, and then also because these teachings of the Prophet go through other people relay them, and then the later you get in Muslim history, so say like many of these hadiths were narrated, and then within the first like 100 years, right after or narrated and compiled within the next within the first like maybe 50 to 100 years of his passing, then compiled and studied in the years after that, in the centuries after that. So you can see where there might be some mistranslation, misunderstanding, that kind of a thing. So there's different degrees. This is just as an explanation to folks who might not know what the hadith are. And so for most mainstream Muslims who believe in Islam will take the Quran as at its word and say this is 100% the statement of God. I might have some trouble with certain ayah of certain verses. I might like other verses better than others, but I believe that the corpus itself is directly from God. The hadith is separate, where most Muslims who believe in Islam truly respect it and respect the kind of intellectual power that went behind compiling them. But they're also kind of weak hadiths that fall into the compiled books, and that not just necessarily weak, but also hadiths that are not necessarily for all people for all time. So apologies for that kind of introduction. I didn't realize that many of your audience members are not Muslim, but I wanted to clarify that for people who are not familiar with these two. So okay, so I want to tackle the first or one of I want to tackle the Aisha hadith first. So Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, who had narrated like the most hadiths from the Prophet. She was physically closest to him, and was a celebrated teacher, especially among Sunni Muslims. She, after the Prophet's passing, was narrated to have said, that had the Prophet been alive today and seen the way women dress and behave and perfume themselves at the mosque, he would have banned women from entering the mosque. So Islamic law, actual Sharia, is not derived based on what the wife of the Prophet
Yeah.
would have done,
Yeah.
or like the opinion of even the closest companions of the prophet, and even sometimes the opinion of the prophet. And before anyone attacks me on that, in the prophet's lifetime, there were some times where he would make a suggestion for something, and the companions around him would say, is this from you or is this from God? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or his wives. And so if it's from God, the understanding is, okay, this is binding. If it's from you, maybe it's good to do, or it's nice, or I want to be closer to you, so I'm gonna, do, like I recently learned a few years ago that the Prophet ﷺ liked pumpkin, or and so I'm like, oh, I like pumpkin too, but I don't like it sweet. And so now when I cook with pumpkin or any squash, I think, oh, like I'm, cooking something that the Prophet might have liked, ﷺ. So so that's, but it's not like binding on all Muslims
You
to
must eat
love.
pumpkin for the
You
rest
must
of your
eat
life.
pumpkin
I don't
forever.
like pumpkin. I'm just going to say
Oh,
that right
more
now,
for me.
okay?
My southern heart is breaking.
Oh, I hate it. So I'm just going to
Oh,
not lie about that. And
that's
was there
okay.
He doesn't
pumpkin
like
in
pumpkin, and
Saudi?
she doesn't like pumpkin sweet. You guys killed me. I'm dead.
Okay, so like, was there pumpkin in the desert?
It's
Like,
like
I
more
don't get it.
squashes.
Was it
Squashes,
pumpkin
yeah.
though? Would it
Pumpkin
be
is a squash?
Gourd, yeah.
Gourd.
gourd?
Gourds,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yunus,
Okay.
Yeah, they
his
grow.
mom had the gourd, right? So grew over
Yeah.
him after the whale spit him up. So
Exactly. So anyway, the point is here that like Islamic law is not derived based on the opinion of people. Even if they say that he might have done this, and so just because she said that was her opinion, that was not Islamic law. That was supposed to be my quick one. The second hadith is uh, about Humayd. She was a companion of the Prophet. She was married, she had children, and she and her community lived far away from Medina, the city of the Prophet, and where like the polity that the Prophet and the many of the other companions lived in. And she would, kind of make the trek late at night or early in the morning, however you want to think about that early morning prayer, from her, village or from her area to the Prophet's mosque. It's dangerous. This is like nobody had cell phones. You're in the
Mm-hmm.
desert. It's at night,
I live in
and
Phoenix. There's scorpion, y'all.
Oh my
ooh,
gosh.
scorpions! No, 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 no,
Uh-uh.
no, thank you. And
Tarantulas too, right?
coyotes, and
Brown
I don't
recluse.
know. Ooh,
Ooh, no.
no, thank you. And so her husband was not happy with the situation. So she would continue to go to the Prophet's mosque, and she would say, you know, the Prophet, praying with the Prophet and praying in community, you get a lot of reward, and I want to get the reward of praying with the Prophet, but it's causing this marital strife. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, told her, your prayer in your home is better for you. As in, like, your prayer in your home will also give you the same reward as praying for me. Why? Because it's, creating peace in her home,
Yeah.
and she's being safe, right, in praying. So then she requested to her family, okay, then I'm gonna have a little prayer room in the darkest, perhaps she said this, in a corner in my home. Now, many people who are opposed to women praying in the mosque or being in the mosque or being in public at all as Muslims will point to this hadith and say, oh, the Prophet said this. Yes, he said this to one woman in one
Specific
situation.
circumstance. Yeah.
It's very specific circumstances for her safety and for her marital accord. Okay? The Prophet, peace be upon him, had actually said general rules to Muslims about women in the mosque, namely, لا تمنعوا إماء إلا مساجد الله. Do not prevent the God's believing women from God's houses, so mosques of God. And he was very clear on this, and that's the general rule. And all of his companions understood it to be so, to the point where, his close companion Umar radiallahu anhu, he didn't like his wife going to the mosque, but she was like, oh, you're gonna stop me? How are you gonna stop me? Like the Prophet. And so he said, like, I can't stop her. And their son, again, so later, the children of the companions, just a generation later, kind of complained, and he said, people are preventing women from going to the mosque. And one of the other, like, they're known as tabi'een, so they're that second generation of Muslims. They didn't live with the Prophet. he said, "Oh, by God, like I will prevent my women from going to the mosque." And so the rejoinder to him was, you know, how on earth, like, who are you? The prophet said, do not prevent women from going to the mosque. Who are you to go against the word of the prophet? And so for me, I'd like to actually push that question right back to the men and the women who are using one specific direction to one specific woman in one specific, experience situation. Why, why for them is that more important or elevated more, universalized than the actual universal teaching and ruling of the Prophet, peace be upon him? What is it in their interior, kind of view of women and view of also Islam as a religion for humanity? Um, what is it in them that elevates that specific situation, that specific, essentially license? It wasn't a ruling; it was a license to her for her to pray at home, and then say, "Oh no, this is binding for all women at all time." And the last thing I want to say, and I'm sorry, I'm so passionate about this.
No, I love it. I can feel it, and it's
I
making
know.
me
It's like coming
excited.
right through the screen.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say about this is also, like, Islamic law is not a static thing. It's always
Yes.
recreated, right? It's always looking
Yes.
at the context in which Muslims are living. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
in America in 2021, you're coming out of COVID, inshallah, and people have been dealing with a lot of loss. We're just coming out of one of the most racist, xenophobic, and Islamophobic presidencies ever. Um, People want, men and women and girls and boys they're looking for spiritual guidance. You're really going to tell half that community, actually more than
They
half
can't
that
go.
community, that they
More
can't
than
go?
half.
Like, are you really going to say, "Oh no, the mosque is not for you, for you Muslim women, or your children under the age of 10, or the girls, or your
Or only the potty
non-Muslim,
trained.
only
Or if
but
you do,
yeah,
behind
no
that
diapers"?
wall or curtain or in the
I heard
basement.
the craziest stories, you guys. Like, there's a mosque here in Chicago that doesn't let babies in with diapers. Like, if your baby's in a diaper,
I've
they're
heard
not
that.
allowed
Oh yeah.
in. Like, it's
Yeah.
wild.
Which one
Potty
is
trained
it?
all
Now I need to know. Call it
Uh,
out.
I'll text it to you.
Text it to me. Call it out. Because
And
that's
the
going to
call it
make
out.
me
Call it out.
mad. I don't even have
Mhm.
potty trained babies right now.
Yeah,
But see,
I
in
mean, it's
situations like
wild.
that, like I think what your question is, Hind, is a good question. Like, why would you grab the information that you want to and
Hmm.
not use the actual general ruling that's supposed to apply, the general ruling of the
Yeah.
Prophet ﷺ? You do that for control and power.
Hmm.
And we
Yes.
see all kinds of people doing that, taking the facts that they like and
Hmm.
promoting those and using those to elevate themselves and boost
Yeah.
themselves
Hmm.
and oppress others.
Yep.
And these particular hadiths are tacked on the specific ones that you were talking about, that we're talking about right now, were grabbed by communities that were probably not literate in Arabic anyway.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'll say that for my community, which makes up the majority of Muslims on the planet.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
they don't speak Arabic. Not one of their 100 languages is Arabic, but they're the ones interpreting it. So maybe they don't know the tafsir of the hadith or the background and circumstance
Yeah.
of the context of the hadith that you must study, as well as the actual words.
Hmm.
Um, but there are communities that historically were not traditionally Muslim. They came to Islam, but they came from communities and tribes that were very misogynistic. And these
Yeah.
particular hadiths spoke to that misogyny and spoke
And
to the
they
need to control women,
grabbed
because if
onto
you
it.
let them come into the space, they will get education. Education always means freedom.
Hmm.
We can't let them have it. So
Exactly.
keep them out of the space that is God's space and God's house and God's knowledge, and we can control them for posterity.
Hmm. It's like what my mom always says, to her students, that, like, you have to be able to, including her non-Arabic students, right? Like a lot of South Asian, a lot of African American, other non-Arabs. You have to know Arabic so that you can do the research on your own. You have to be able to have access to these hadiths and to the scholarship so that you can say to people, wait a minute, what, like, your interpretation is not correct. And it's not just not correct, that its incorrectness is harmful, right? Like, this is really, really harmful. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important for women and men to educate themselves on hadith, the hadith sciences in general. How do we accept a hadith is strong versus weak, and then how do we know a hadith is for one, specific situation versus something that's generalized? How do we know when to say, well, okay, that doesn't apply to us in the 21st century. So we need to have ijtihad, which is different than jihad. Ijtihad,
Yes.
kind of,
Jihad
essentially
isn't
like,
bad either, by the way.
it's
Yes.
not bad. No,
We
it's
need
not.
we need to reclaim that word, everybody. Let's reclaim it
Exactly.
and embrace it. No, I totally agree.
Exactly. And
So
so,
it's
like, looking at the, yeah, sorry, like looking at the laws, looking at the tradition, and then saying, okay, well, what makes sense for us in the 21st century, in terms of serving the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community.
100%. And I do want to caution those who are hearing, because I know you're out there and you're hearing, Islam doesn't change with time. Islam is like forever. It is.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Okay, we're not saying that. What we're saying is
Mhm.
that um, Sharia law, two scariest words in the media, I'm telling you, yes. Sharia law is not pliable and not changeable, but it is relative. Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
So it is relative to the circumstances, it's relative to the place. We are not a black and white people.
Mm-mm.
If we were, we would not be the middle way. We would not be, from the Prophet ﷺ, who was the mercy to mankind, and he was the most merciful, and he would never do anything that was so black and white. It was dynamic in his lifetime, and he would decide what applied to whom. That's why
Mhm.
Sharia law is not this big scary thing, not for Muslims,
Mhm.
certainly not for non-Muslims, because honestly, guys, we're so busy with our own garbage, we don't have time to apply it to you guys. It's
It
too
doesn't. It doesn't apply to
it does.
non-Muslims.
It can't, first of all,
Yeah.
and it's not coming to get you. It never
Yeah.
has. So just take a chill pill. But for those who are hearing like, oh, Islam changes, we're trying to say that Islam changes. You have to change it just because it's 2021. That's not what we're saying. We're
Yeah.
saying that it is circumstantial, it is relative, and you need somebody more educated and definitely literate in the Arabi
Mhm.
to, if you're going to rely on somebody to interpret it for you, please let it be somebody who's, well
Knowledgeable.
versed in the actual language itself, and not somebody who's like a generational Malana who is interpreting it based on, the little gully of the village of the tribe in the north of the country of the frontier in the mountains that doesn't have a bus or a road,
Mhm.
like it matters
Yeah.
where your knowledge is coming from. So please take it all with a grain of salt until you can verify it.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything, Hind?
And you have the right to access that knowledge yourself. Like like there's
Yes.
no clerical like hierarchy in our tradition. There's no barrier for women. There should be no barrier. And actually zakat, one of the kind of categories of zakah, which is the obligatory charity that that Muslims give, is for a student of knowledge, because Islam does not, say only the elite can pursue knowledge. So you have the right to pursue that knowledge, and please do. And I'm so happy that we have a lot of women now who not only have pursued that knowledge in Islamic sciences, but are also now teaching it. And now,
Yes.
especially like post COVID or during, I don't want to say post COVID, I don't want to jinx anything. But during COVID, we've seen women scholars being so accessible online because it's online. you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
It's made the world a lot smaller, alhamdulillah. So
Yes. Yes.
we are super excited, and we I think we at Mommyingwhilemuslim at least are committed to making sure that manels do not exist. We do appreciate very much those imam allies and male allies who have come forward, and when they
Mhm.
see those manels advertised and their names or faces are on there, to say, I will not sit
Mhm.
on a manel unless you have a sister representing, because alhamdulillah, as you said, they're there. We have those sisters. And they don't need to be tokenized. You don't need to
Mm-mm.
just pick out, like the doctor mom that you know from the community, or, the Islamic school principal. You have actual female scholars that can speak to the same issues more at the same level, if not better, and more accurately and more in tune with the audiences that they're serving. So thank you to those allies. Zeba, did you have any other questions?
No, all I know is that, between the six boys, between the two of us, we're definitely going to
Oh
make
wow,
them
mashallah.
advocates. We're going to make them advocates for that because they see some powerful mamas on the panels that we're on. So I have to say that is 100% for sure. So we're going to do a quick rapid fire with you, Hind. Are you ready for this?
Yes, I'm a little scared.
It's always
It's so
scary.
fun.
It's so Joe, are you gonna put up the timer for us? Uh-oh, rapid fire. The timer starts now. If you were to have all the extra time in the world, what would you do?
Travel.
Oh, girl, yes, even after COVID. What makes you really uneasy right now?
The relaxation of all the people who were political activists during Trump. They seem to be taking a breather. We can't take a breather.
Can't take a breather, and silence is deafening, people.
Yes.
I'm hearing crickets.
Your Muslim
What are you the
friends
most
are not
afraid
okay.
of?
Most afraid, the same, actually, the same thing. That the silence of activists will actually just lead us right back to the status quo.
And our the best piece of advice you've ever been given.
Oh my goodness. Listen to and read every aspect of an argument. Before,
Oh, I love
even
that.
even if you already have a point of view.
I love that. Oh my God, we got a critical thinker. I love her. I thought that died. Like, remember we used to have critical thinking classes in school? They don't teach those anymore.
They don't teach those anymore.
don't teach
But
those.
but the fact that she said this is not a joke. Okay, she said this, and this is wallahi. I had this quote pulled up before I even came on today, and this is my Rumi's Little Book of Wisdom that Zara got me for Mother's Day. And it says, a mirror has no image of its own. So when you see its reflection, it's that of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to
Right?
read that
Deep.
again. That's pretty deep.
That's deep.
That's so deep. Your kid is deep.
Goosebumps. Oh, she's like, even though she's complaining about me for losing her glasses.
Oh.
Still a teenager.
She's deep until she's
Deep
saying,
as
it's
teenager.
your job. Now I'm going to go blind. Apparently, she's going to go blind.
That happens. Yes. Immediately when you don't wear your glasses.
But thank you so much, Hind, for, taking us to school. We really appreciate it. Please text me that name of the mosque in Chicago. And hopefully, inshallah, I finally get to come after almost 2 years, and maybe we'll see each other, inshallah, this
Yes,
summer.
definitely.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate this. And you are one of our Shiros on socials. And we would
Shiro.
love for our audience to know where to find you in case they decide not to read the show notes that we take the trouble to write every week.
Read the show notes, guys. It also makes it accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Hind Maliki or at side_entrance. You can find me on Instagram at side entrance. And I'm on Facebook, but it's mostly, I'm a little bit more silent on that. I wanted to say, if I could just give a shout out to a couple of organizations that I think are doing a great job of not having manels. One is Celebrate Mercy. They seem to be doing a great job. The other one is ISNA. Since COVID started, every other week they have a woman giving the Friday sermon bayan, and they do that very intentionally. I think that's really important.
Are they having a conference this year?
I haven't heard. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm
curious about that.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I think it was the last full night, like the day before, it was one of the last nights of Ramadan, that Islah LA, which is a mosque out in LA, led by their Imam Jihad Safar and Ustaza Maryam Amir, who is a scholar out of the Bay Area, they had this phenomenal, multi-hour session of Quran reciters from around the world, men and women, people of varying kind of expertise of Quran recitation, every ethnicity that you could imagine. And it was beautiful and amazing. And one of the imams who was reciting actually said something that before even that event, even though he accepted the invitation, and even though he has a daughter and his wife is a Quran teacher and his daughter as well as his son are learning Quran, that he didn't fully internalize why it was important to have public Quran recitation by women, for his daughter and for his son until that event. And so I'm actually, for your show notes, I'm going to send you guys the link. It's not from YouTube. It is just amazing to see the diverse. So I wanted to give a shout out as well to Islah LA, and generally shout out to African American Muslim community in this country, which does not have this problem. You know, their mosques are fully accessible
Yeah.
I
to
love it.
women and men.
We found out from socials from a lot of our sisters in Africa about how shocked they were when they
Oh
came to
yeah,
American Masajid and saw barriers. They were like, what is
What
this?
is
yeah,
this?
And
And
they
why
think
are
we're
we doing it?
completely uncivilized. And I'm like, sisters, help us. Like,
yeah.
please teach us. No, I love the shout outs. Thank you so much. And we will definitely include that YouTube video link in our show notes. And we do hope that everybody tunes in to our power panel earlier today, finds Hind and the movements that she's a part of, and stays active, because we got to keep talking. We got to keep working. We got to keep staying uncomfortable, because that's how change happens, guys. Thank you so much for
Amen.
joining us
Thank
on
you for
another
the
episode.
invitation. Thank you for the invitation. Assalamualaikum.
I'm
Absolutely.
like,
Back again to sponsor our podcast is Muslim Kids TV with the 25% discount using code MK2021. Have your kids play both secular and Islamic games and catch Islamic videos you won't find anywhere else. These games are coded primarily by Muslim moms, so you're never going to hate your kids having electronics again. Another one of our sponsors this month is Guidance Residential, bringing you an upcoming webinar titled Explore a Growing Niche Market Opportunity for Real Estate Agents. All of our Muslim Mommy Realtors, this one's for you, coming June 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern, RSVP at the link shown.